Welcome everyone to this section of the course on PDFs and spreadsheets. Python has the ability to work with PDF files and spreadsheet files such as a .csv file. In this section of the course, we're going to be exploring libraries that allow us to interact with these files, such as reading information from them. As a quick note before we begin, we highly recommend you work in the same location as the lecture notebooks, since we will be referencing many files that we've provided for you that are already in that location. Otherwise, you'll need to be worrying about providing the full file path, so it's a lot easier if you just start your notebook in the same location as the lecture notebooks. Okay, let's get started. I'll see you at the next lecture. Welcome everyone to this lecture on working with CSV files in Python. CSV stands for comma separated variables, and it's a very common output for spreadsheet programs. An example CSV file would look something like this. Usually at the top you have the actual names of the columns separated by commas. So here we can see some sort of employee spreadsheet where we have the name of the employee, the number of hours they work, and then maybe their hourly rate. And then each subsequent row represents a data point, such as David, who works 20 hours at a $15 per hour rate, and then Claire, and so on. Note that all the columns are separated by that comma. And you can technically separate it by other things like a tab, or a horizontal bar, or various other punctuation points like semicolons. And when we deal with this, we'll see that we can actually specify what that separator actually is. Now you should note that while it's possible to export Excel files and Google Spreadsheets to .csv files, it only exports the information. So that is to say things like formulas within Excel, or images, or general functions like macros, those actually can't be within a CSV file. So simply put, the .csv file only contains the raw data from the spreadsheet. In this lecture, we're going to be working with the built-in CSV module for Python, which will allow us to grab columns, rows, and values from a .csv file, as well as write information to a .csv file. So our main goals here is just be able to extract information and then write information. And technically in between those steps, you can do whatever you want with the information within a Python script. Now keep in mind, this is a very popular space for outside libraries that don't come built in with Python, which you may want to explore if you're using a particular program. So I just want to tell you a couple of other libraries to consider. One of my favorites is called Pandas, and this is technically a full data analysis library, and it can work with almost any tabular data type, not just things like CSV file. It also works with things like SQL files, directly with Excel files, and so much more. It can also run visualizations and data analysis. It's one of my personal favorites. However, it is a much larger library than just something like the CSV module. So we teach it in various data science courses here, and you can check those out if you're interested in it. The reason we don't cover it here is because it's such a huge library with so many facets to it, it would just take an entirely new course to really cover it in detail. However, it is one of my favorite Python libraries. Another library to consider is called OpenPyXL, and this one's actually designed specifically for Excel files. So if you find yourself working with Excel a lot, or you're an Excel power user, but you want to add in some Python functionality, OpenPyXL actually retains a lot of Excel-specific functionality, things like supporting Excel formulas within the library. You can also check out python-excel.org, which actually tracks various other Excel-based Python libraries. And there's also the Google Sheets Python API. If you find yourself using Google Spreadsheets a lot and you would like to have a direct Python interface for it, you can use this Google Sheets Python API. And keep in mind, this now then allows you to directly make changes to the spreadsheets that are hosted online. So you're actually running a script locally that will reach out through the internet through the API call and then edit the sheets that are hosted on your Google Drive. Now, the backdrop of that is that this is technically a more complex syntax than what you're going to see here, and that's also because it's available in many programming languages. It's not just a Python-specific API, it's available in many programming languages. So if you find yourself using Google Sheets a lot, you can check out the Python API. They actually have really good documentation online. Simply Google search Google Sheets Python API, and the first link should take you there. Okay, so even though there's lots of options here, the common factor really between all of these spreadsheet programs is that they should always be able to export to a .csv file, essentially the raw data inside the spreadsheet. Let's go ahead and explore Python's built-in capabilities with the CSV module. Let's hop over to a Jupyter Notebook. All right, here I am inside Jupyter, As a quick note, I highly recommend that you open up your new notebook to follow along inside of the PDFs and Spreadsheets folder, because if you scroll down here, we have the lecture notebooks, but we also have the .csv files we're going to be working with. And if you don't want to worry about having to provide the full file path to them, you can simply do like I just did and open up a new, in this case, untitled notebook in the same location. All right. If you ever have any questions of where your Jupyter Notebook is actually located, you can always type pwd in a cell, run it, and it will report back to you where you're actually located on your computer. So let's begin by showing you how to read in a CSV file. We're actually going to show you a very common encoding error first, so we will actually open this technically in the wrong way. So the first thing we're going to do is import CSV, and then what we're going to do is we have a couple of steps here. We first just open the file just as you would with any other file. Then the next step is to call csv.reader on it, and then is to try to reformat it into a Python object, typically a list of lists. So let's go ahead and try this, and then we'll show you what may happen to you for an encoding error. Okay, so first thing, open the file. We do this just like any other file. So I will say data is equal to open, and we'll be working with example.csv, which is located in this same PDF and Spreadsheets folder. It's right here, example.csv. If you're working somewhere else, then you need to provide the full file path, which is essentially attaching all of this in front of example.csv. Okay, so open the file, nothing new there. Now what we're going to do is try to convert it into CSV data by saying CSV data is equal to CSV reader, and we pass in that data, and then we will try to reformat it into a Python object list of lists. So that means I'm going to say data lines is equal to, and I'm going to attempt to call list on CSV data. And you should notice an error here, and the error, which is a super common error when you're working with various CSV files, text files, or PDF files, is this Unicode decode error. And essentially just says, hey, this character mapping codec, I don't understand it, I can't decode it. And essentially what that means is there's different encodings that a file can have. And what the encoding is basically able to read or not read different types of special characters. So the actual special character that's messing this particular file read up is the @ symbol. So this particular CSV file actually contains emails that has this @ symbol, and so the default encoding doesn't work. And you may experience the same sort of encoding problems if you're dealing with files that are written in another language. For example, if you're dealing with a Spanish written file and it has special accents over certain characters, you may need to use an encoding like a Latin encoding. And typically you can easily Google search for the correct encodings depending on what the file is. So what we're going to do here is we'll come back and we'll say data is equal to open example.csv, but I'm going to add in an encoding argument and say encoding is equal to UTF-8. And again, you can easily search online for different encodings that may be useful to you depending on what kind of files you're trying to open and what language those files are in. So we add in this UTF-8 encoding, which is essentially telling it what characters it can read. And then if we run these lines again, we don't get an error. So if you get this sort of Unicode decode error, you can start looking up the different kinds of encodings, and it's specifically helpful if you already know what special characters are in your actual .csv file. I knew there were emails here, so that means I know there's an @ symbol, which was what causing the error, which means I need to use UTF-8 encoding. And I often recommend this one as a good starting point, especially if your file's in English. Okay, so what is data lines? Let's take a look at it. We will say data lines, and it looks like it's a list of lists. So the very first item are the actual column names, ID, first name, last name, email, gender, IP address, city, and then the second item is going to be an actual data row. So we have Joseph, and then Zaniolini, and then we have simplemachines.org. And keep in mind, all this information is fake and made up. Okay, so what we're going to do here is we're going to show you how you can kind of loop through this to actually read in some of the data information. So we know that the very first item in this list, if we check out 0 here, Those are the actual column names. So typically CSV data, the very first row, are going to be the column names. If we want to know how many rows there actually are, we can check the length of data lines. And I know there's actually 1,000 rows plus one row that is the column information. So there's 1,000 data points. So one of these rows right here is this very first one with just the column names, technically not a data point. And what we could do as well is say for line in data lines, and we can say starting from the beginning, go all the way up to, let's say, row number 5, go ahead and print the line. And I'm going to zoom out here just a little bit so we can see this formatted nicely. And we should be able to see something like this. And if I zoom out a little more, I can see now the rows formatted nicely. So what can I do with this? Well, I now know that I can essentially extract any row I want. For example, if I wanted row number 10, I simply need to zoom back in here. To see row number 10, I simply need to say data lines, and then you have to kind of figure out what number is correct here. Recall that 0 is going to be the column names. So that means if I were to provide 10, it actually works out nicely because 0 indexing starts off at 0 in Python, which means that very first item corresponds to the column header, so that index 1 is actually your very first data point. So then so on, index 10 is actually the 10th data point. All right, so I know how to extract a row. What if I wanted to extract a single value? Well, then I simply say what row I want, and then here, notice this is a list, so I can maybe grab this person's email. So that's 0, 1, 2, 3. And now I can grab the email of this particular person. Okay. Let's imagine that I want an entire column. So for example, let's say I wanted just all the emails in every single row. How can I do that? Well, I know that's at index 3, so I could simply say my list of all emails is equal to an empty list so far, and then I'll go for every line and data lines, or you could take it for a subset. Recall that at this point you should be starting at 1 since you don't actually want to grab that email column name. And let's go up to row 15 here. We could go all the way to the end. We'll simply say all emails, append, and then we'll say line at index 3. So all we're saying here is go through every row and make sure you start at 1. If you want, you can go all the way to the end to grab everything. And then we'll say all emails append, and every line, recall, at index 3 is the email. So if you run this, you should notice now all emails is just this giant list of all the emails inside that data set. Now you notice that, let's say for one of these lines, let's go ahead and grab one. So we'll say data lines, let's just grab 10 again. You'll notice that right now, the first name and last name are separated. Let's imagine we wanted a list of the full names because we want to maybe automate an email to them and we want to address them by their full name. Well, that's actually pretty easy to do. All we need to do is very similar, say full names, empty list, and then when we iterate, we just add in a little bit of logic. We say for line and data lines, starting at 1, let's say go all the way to the end. We can say full names, and we're going to append, and this is where you can do the logic. So I know that index 1 is the first name, this index 0 is an ID, and then I'm going to simply concatenate it with, let's say, line 2. However, this would leave no space between the first name and last name, so let's go ahead and concatenate it one more time in between with an empty space, just so there's a space between the first name and the last name. You run that, and now you have a list of the full names. So now you can see with simple indexing, you can pretty much grab any information you want. So what we're going to do now is review how you can write to a CSV file. So the way we're going to do this is we're going to say file underscore to underscore output is equal to open, and this is where you can decide what the name of your CSV file is going to be. So let's go ahead and call this to save file.csv. And you should note that the way we're going to set it up here is this will overwrite any existing file with the same name. And you can always change your mode depending on what you want to do here. So in this case, I'm going to say, comma, mode is equal to W, which is write mode, and then this will also overwrite any existing CSV file with the same name. And then the last thing we have to do is we need to specify that new line is an empty string. Note there's no space here. It's just one quote followed by another quote. Then we're going to hit enter here, and then we're going to say CSV underscore writer is equal to CSV dot writer, essentially the opposite of CSV dot reader, and we call file to output, and then we have to specify the delimiter that we want. Delimiter is just another word for what is the separator, what is actually separating one column from another, and you can say it's a comma. Keep in mind this can technically be anything you want it to be. It's also really common to have semicolons as a separator, and it's even common to have what's sometimes known as a TSV file or tab separated, which you can denote with \t for a tab. We will keep it as comma. The last thing to note is CSV writer is essentially the sister to CSV reader, and if you're opening a CSV file that has a different separator than a comma, you could have also specified the delimiter parameter when we called up here CSV.reader. And you can check out the online documentation for the other arguments you can pass in to CSV. Okay, so what we're going to do is write this file to output, delimiter. We go ahead and run this. And then there's different ways we can do this. So for example, I can write a single row. So I can say CSV writer dot write row, and then I just pass in a single row of items like A, B, C. Or what I could do is write multiple rows. So I could say CSV writer dot write rows, and then just takes in a list of lists. And keep in mind, this time it has to actually match up with the rows that are already there. So if there's 3 columns already, the next entry should also have just 3 values. So we'll say 1, 2, 3, and then let's say 4, 5, 6. Notice these are strings that are being written here. And you can keep writing rows that way. So you can imagine that if I really wanted to, I could make adjustments to the data lines here, and then eventually just say CSV writer.write rows, data lines. And you can check out the different modes from before. So if you wanted to append to a file, you can do that as well. If you want to just read to a file, then that's just mode R as we saw above. But all the modes that we previously discussed of opening text files with Python apply here. So we're just doing an overwrite, so we're writing ABC, those are my column names, and then here's my data, 1, 2, 3 is one row, then 4, 5, 6, and we have to remember that we need to actually close the file. So you don't close the file through CSV writer, that's just writing to the file. To close the file, you actually grab file to output again, and then you go ahead and close it. And now you should be able to come over here and see you have toSaveFile.csv as created. Now let's imagine that I've already worked with this file, and instead of overwriting it, I just want to add new rows to it. As I mentioned, this all works with just editing the mode. So all we need to do here is say f is equal to open, call that same file to savefile.csv, and then the mode we're going to have here is A for append, which essentially just means I don't want to overwrite this file, I just want to append to it. So we'll say new line is equal to empty string again, and we'll say CSV writer is equal to CSV.writer f. So we have this writer object, and then I can write new rows to it. So I simply need to say writer. Let's go ahead and write a single row. Let's just have this be 1, 1, 1, or 1, 2, 3 again. Doesn't really matter here. And then you should get an output here, essentially telling you the number of characters written. So recall that we're not just writing 1, 2, 3, but we're also writing commas for them, as well as a new line. And then finally, when you're done with this file, you can close it as before. Okay, so that's the basics of working with CSV file. Technically, there's usually just 3 things you do with a CSV file. You read in the information, and then you do whatever you want with it as the second part. And then once you're done, you can either write that information back or just save it somewhere within your Python script as a Python object. So you open and read a CSV file. Step 2, do whatever you want with the information of Python. Step 3, you can write to a new file or write to an existing file. Thanks, and we'll see you at the next lecture. Welcome everyone to this lecture on working with PDF files with Python. PDF stands for Portable Document Format, and it was developed by Adobe in the 1990s, which is probably why when you think of PDF, you think of Adobe's PDF Reader or another Adobe program. Now the most important thing to keep in mind is that while PDFs share the same extension .pdf and can be viewed in multiple PDF readers, many PDFs are not machine readable through Python. Since PDFs mainly encapsulate and then display a fixed layout flat document, there is sometimes no machine readable standard format, unlike CSV files, which pretty much once you have a CSV file in place, Python can easily read it. So unfortunately, that means that a PDF that was, for instance, simply scanned is highly unlikely to be readable by Python. Additions to PDFs, such as images, tables, format adjustments, or even things like simple font changes, can also render a PDF unreadable by Python. Now there are many paid PDF programs outside of Python that can read and extract from these specialized files, but we're going to be focusing on free open source software, such as the extremely popular PyPDF2 library. Now we've made sure that the PDF files included in this course material are readable by PyPDF2. Unfortunately, we can't offer assistance for your own personal PDF files if they are not readable by PyPDF2. So basically, if you have your own PDF file and you try to follow along with what we've done here, and for some reason it shows up as empty text, like there's nothing in the PDF file, when you know there's something in there, that basically means that PyPDF2 will not be able to read your file, unfortunately. And there really isn't much we can do on our end to help out. Okay, so let's see what we can do with PDF files in Python. Remember, you're first going to need to install PyPDF2 at your command line with pip install PyPDF2, and note the capitalization here. Okay, let's head over to a Jupyter Notebook. Alright, here I am at the Jupyter Notebook. A couple of things I wanted to point out is, again, we recommend that you open up this new notebook in the same folder, PDFs and Spreadsheets, so you can actively grab this PDF documents we're going to be working with. So we'll come back to the notebook, and the second thing I want to mention is the lecture notebook that goes along with this, called Working with PDF Files, has a link in the very top to other Python libraries that you may be interested in if you find yourself working with PDFs a lot. So that link basically has a survey of tools that allow you to do things like read from specialized PDF files. So if you ever have problems with PyPDF2, you may want to explore these other libraries. Keep in mind, in general, we can only read from PDF files. There are some specialized libraries that can attempt to write to PDF files, but that can often result in errors. So in this lecture, we're just going to be focusing on reading in from PDF files, possibly adding pages to PDF files, and then really working with the text from a PDF file. So let's go ahead and get started. First thing we need to do is make sure you've already installed PyPDF2. If you haven't, just go to your command line and type pip install, capital PY, capital PDF2. So I already ran that at my command line, so I have it installed, which means I should be able to import it now, PyPDF2, and there it is. Just as before with the CSF reader, what we're going to do is we're going to open, using normal Python, the PDF file, and then what we're going to do is attach a reader object to it. So I will say f is equal to open, and the file we're working with is called workingbusinessproposal.pdf. And the second thing you have to note here is kind of like we were working with image files before, we had to read and write the binary mode. In this case, we have to have the mode be RB for read binary, since this is not just a normal .text file. Next, in order to make sure we can actually work with this, we say PDF reader, and then we call the PyPDF2 library and call PDF file reader, and then we're going to pass an F there. And if that worked correctly, we should be able to view how many pages this PDF file had by calling the num pages attribute. And so there's 5 pages in this PDF file. Let's grab the first page by saying page 1 is equal to our PDF reader object, and then the method here is getPage, and then you just pass in the index position of the page you want. So if you want the first page, that's at index 0. Then if you want the text on that page, we say page 1 text is equal to, you grab that page 1 object and you call extract text. Run that, and now you should have the text as a Python string. And this is where you can do things like perform a regular expression search for a particular pattern. So again, the steps are to read in the file with RB as your mode, use PDF file reader on that file, confirm the number of pages, and then check if it worked by saying get page, extract text, and then view the text. Keep in mind, even if you see the number of pages is correct, for a certain PDF file, such as a scanned PDF file or something that's too blurry in order to extract the text, this number of pages will still work, but when you extract the text, you'll just get an empty string. So if you're getting an empty string, it means your PDF file is not compatible with PyPDF2. And you may want to check out some of those other libraries that we link to inside of the lecture notebook. Once you're done with working with the text, you'll go ahead and close this off. So as you can imagine, we could have easily created a for loop for the range and number of pages to extract all the text from every page by simply just having this be a variable call instead of hard-coded 0. Now let's talk about adding to PDF files. While we can technically write to a PDF file, we can only write another PDF page. We can't go into the middle of a page in a PDF file and write text to it with PyPDF2. Some paid programs allow you to do that, but I haven't seen anything in open source Python that allows you to do that consistently. And it really just has to do with the complexity behind the PDF format. If you plan on reading and writing to a file, it should probably not be in a PDF format. It should be in something like a text document or even a Word document. PDFs in general are not designed to be easily editable. So what we're going to do here is we're going to show you how to add pages to a PDF. So let's go ahead and open up that file again. Just as we did before, we're going to say working business proposal.pdf. I just used tab to autocomplete there. Open it with read binary and then assign the PDF reader just as we did before. So PDF reader, and then, make sure we call it off PyPDF. So PyPDF2.pdf file reader. There we go. So we're reading it just as before. I'll grab the first page, equal to PDF reader, get page 0. Okay, so nothing's changed before. Right now, I have this document, working business proposal, and I'm only interested in the first page, so I got it. So maybe I have a colleague or coworker that says, hey, can you programmatically grab all the first pages off the PDF, or maybe all the last pages off the PDF because that has certain information that I'm looking for and I don't need the entire PDF. So what we could do is programmatically do that by then writing this to a new file. And to do this, I create a writer object. We'll say PDF_writer and say PyPDF2. And in this case, we'll say PDF file writer. And this creates a writer object. And then we add pages to this writer object. So we say PDF writer, add page, and the page we should add should already be a specialized file type. So what I mean by that is if I were to insert a cell below here, let's check the type of first page. It should be a PDF page object in order to be added as a PDF writer. It shouldn't just be a raw Python string. So what we will do here is we'll go ahead and type in first page, since I know that's a correct page object. And I could keep adding pages, but for some reason, let's say I only wanted that first page. And now what I need to do is open up a new file and then write to it. So we will create an object called PDF output. And you could have done this before. It doesn't have to be in this exact order. But I'll open up some new file. So we'll say some brand new doc.pdf. And we'll open it now with write binary. Keep in mind this will overwrite the current existing PDF file if you have something called that. And then we say PDF writer dot write, and we say PDF_output. And then we can close off the file. Okay, so what actually happened here? Notice that we read the file just before. We got a specific page object Then, in order to write to a new file, we went ahead and created PDF file writer. We add pages, as many as we want, to this writer object. Then we open some new file using standard Python with write binary, and then we use the PDF writer to write to that, and then we can close them off. So notice I have fclose, and then I will say PDF output, and I will close that one as well. And now both the file I read and the file I wrote to are closed. So let's finish off this lecture by just working through a simple example. Let's imagine I wanted to grab all the text that exists within a PDF file. I can do that with a simple for loop. Just to reiterate the steps again, using standard Python, I open up that PDF file with read binary. And then what I'm going to do is have a placeholder. I will make this placeholder a list where the index of the list will correspond to the page number. So essentially, I'll have one really large string per position in this list. Then we create our reader object with py PDF2. Make sure you have the capitalization correct. We create in this case, a reader object, pass in the file we opened, and then we'll say for num in range PDF reader number of pages. So recall that's an integer that's returned. Then I will say page is equal to PDF reader. I will get that page at that particular number position, and then I will say PDF text, go ahead and append the extracted text, which I can get by saying get that page object and extract the text on that page. So if we run this, it went ahead and worked. So then I should be able to say PDF text, and I get this long list where each item in that list is the corresponding text. So this is the text on the first page. Here's the text on the second page, and so on. You see these \n's, those are just new lines, which means if I really wanted to, I could just print out this string instead of returning it, which will actually show you kind of where those new lines stand. And I'm really zoomed in here, so it might look a little strange, but it should look something like this. You can now see the paragraphs and new lines. All right, so that's an example of working with PDF and reading and writing to PDFs. Coming up next, we're going to set you loose on a puzzle exercise that will combine both working with CSV files and working with PDF files. I'll see you at the next lecture. Welcome back, everyone. In this lecture, we're going to have an overview of the PDF and CSV puzzle exercise. In the next lecture, we'll go through the solutions. Let's check out the notebook. All right, here I am in Jupyter. If you notice, under PDFs and spreadsheets, there's a file called PDFs Spreadsheets Puzzle. That's the one we're working with. In the next lecture, we'll go over the solutions. Open up PDFs and Spreadsheets Puzzle exercise. And again, since this is a puzzle, we're not going to give you too many hints, but basically you have two tasks here. One is you need to use Python to extract the Google Drive link from the CSV file. And we gave you a hint that it's actually located along the diagonal from top left to bottom right. And where you can find this CSV file is if you look under PDFs and Spreadsheets, there's a folder called Exercise Files. If you open up that folder, you'll see a CSV file. So what you have to do is you have to figure out how to open up this CSV file with Python. So you'll do that here under task 1, and along the diagonal, figure out how to use a Python loop or something similar to extract it, and it should take you to this Google Drive link. Then go to that Google Drive link and download the PDF document from Google Drive. In case you can't access Google Drive, we already downloaded it for you in this PDF file here. So then your task 2 is to figure out how to find a hidden phone number within this PDF document. And keep in mind, we also are not going to tell you what the correct formatting of that phone number is. So you have to use regular expressions along with what you've learned about PDFs and scanning the text to figure out where that phone number is. There's basically an unlimited number of ways you can figure out task 2. But at the end, you should figure out that it's this phone number right here. Okay, so in the next lecture, we'll go through an example solution. I'll see you there. Welcome back, everyone. In this lecture, we're going to go through an example solution for the PDF and CSV file puzzle exercise question. Let's head over to a Jupyter Notebook. Okay, here I am inside of the Jupyter Notebook, and let's start with the first task. I'm just going to zoom in here so we can see it a little better. And the first task is to grab the Google Drive link from the CSV file. And we get the hint that it's located along the diagonal. So how do we do this? Well, we first have to open this up, so we'll say data is equal to open, and recall it's underneath the exercise files, and it's called findthelink.csv. And eventually you'll discover that you should have encoding equal to UTF-8 because of the possible different symbols here. And this should be a dash, not equal sign. There we go. And next we're going to say is CSV data is equal to csv.reader on that data. And to make sure we can use csv.reader, I should import CSV. So we'll go ahead and run that. Looks like it worked. Let's go ahead and check out the data lines by saying list the CSV data and confirm that that worked. And it looks like we have the list of lists. So what do we need to actually grab here? It's along the diagonal from the top left to the bottom right. So if we think about this, it means that the first letter is the first item in the first row. Then the second letter of the link should be the second item in the second row, and so on. Which means I can easily solve this by doing something like the following. Because if I take a look at data lines 0, I actually want item 0. If I take a look at data lines 1, I should want item 1 from this. And then 2, I want item 2. So notice it's starting to spell HTTP. So let's create a simple for loop that should be able to solve this for us. I'll start off by doing this as an empty string, and then I will just concatenate to that string. So then I will say for row number, comma data, in, and here's the trick, I'm going to use enumerate on data lines. I will say my link string, and then I will take the current link string and simply concatenate it with data at that row number. So recall, data itself is going to be the row. Row number is the current number of the row we're on. So this will essentially say row 0, row number is 0. Row 2, row number is 2, and so on, which then I'm going to use as indexing here. So if we run this, I should then be able to see the full link as a string. Okay, and the reason we're able to do this is because it's specifically the diagonal is from the top left to the bottom right of the CSV file. And you'll notice that it's a kind of a square CSV file. There are as many columns as there are rows. And it's specifically designed that way because it's a puzzle. So if you go to this link, you should then be able to download the PDF file. We also already downloaded it for you, just in case you weren't able to download it yourself. So what we're going to do here is start off by importing PyPDF2. And then we'll say f is equal to open. Underneath exercise files, I'm going to open find the phone number.pdf with read binary. And then we'll say PDF is equal to, and we call PyPDF2. And since I just want to read this, we'll say PDF reader on that file. Let's check the number of pages. So the number of pages it has, remember that's an attribute, is 17 pages. So somewhere on these pages is text that I eventually want to do a regular express and search on because I need to find the phone number. And we did give you a hint that this is what the phone number should look like, but we didn't actually tell you what the actual formatting was. So note there are different ways of formatting a phone number. So I actually don't know if the phone number is going to have, for instance, dashes, or if it's going to have periods between it, or if there's going to be parentheses here in this fashion. So what I need to do is first figure out what the actual format of the number is, and then what I can do is start trying to figure out how to actually grab it with regular expressions. Something I do know though is that regardless of how this is actually formatted, it's highly likely that there's going to be 3 digits in a row somewhere. So I should probably start searching for 3 digits in a row and then the remaining text after that, and that way I can begin to discover how this is actually formatted. So again, it's kind of an unlimited amount of ways when you're dealing with regular expressions that you can search for this. But what I'm going to do is start off by importing regular expressions, and we'll say pattern is equal to, and let's start off with just a very simple pattern of 3 digits in a row. So we run that, and now let's grab all the text within this document. So we'll say all text is equal to, and what I'll have here is just a string, and eventually it's going to be a giant string of all the text. And we'll say for n in range PDF num pages, say page is equal to PDF get page at that number, say page text is equal to page dot extract text, and then what I'm going to do is say all text is equal to the current all text, and I'll add an empty space, and then I'll concatenate page text itself. So what does that do? Well, if I run this, it's going to take a little bit of time, but now I have a giant string with all the text here. And that means I can begin to actually use regular expression search. And if I wanted to, I could search the pages in this loop over and over again. It's really up to you how you can basically perform this task. So let's start actually looking for a pattern within all text. And if you take a look at the lecture notebook that goes along with this, we actually have a hint link that takes you to this Stack Overflow page that asks, how can I find all the matches to a regular expression in Python? Unfortunately, if we try something like search, that only brings up the very first match. So if I were to search for my pattern of 3 numbers, and I want to search all the text, notice I'll just get back one match, and it's actually 000, which, given what we actually know, is not the correct number. Which means I need to find multiple matches, because I don't know if there's maybe page numbers here that are 3 in a row, or some other reference that could be messing this up. So how do we find all the matches? We have 2 methods, find all, which will only return the matching strings, and then find iter, which will return over the match objects. So let's go ahead and check that out. If I were to say find all for my 3 numbers, I can begin to see that later on in the text, my 3 numbers start appearing, 505, 503, and then the first 3 digits of the last part of that phone number. But what I really want to do is figure out how can I get to something like 505 and then figure out what's the remaining text. So to do that, we're going to do the following. We'll say find iter, and we'll say for match in find iter. Since this is an iteration, it's going to return these match objects. We'll go ahead and just say print out my match. And if we run that, then we can begin to see the actual locations of these. So let's go ahead and grab the location of 505. So I'm going to run this again so I can see all text. And let's start at that index location. And let's say we'll go up to that index location plus, let's say, 20 more characters. So you run that and you can begin to see 505, 503, 4455. And if you want a little bit more context, we can go ahead and maybe grab a little bit before that to a little bit after. Run that, we can begin to see something that says like phone number is, and so on. So here I can finally see the way the phone number is formatted. It looks like there's actually dots in between it, which means I can either just say my problem is solved and grab the issue here, or I could come back up here and edit my pattern to say something like D3 dot D4, run that again, and then instead of this, I just need to say run that once, and I can see the full match, 505, 503, 4455. And if you're curious about what this actual phone number is, you can check out the lecture notebook that goes along with this. It's actually from the show Better Call Saul, and it's the phone number for his fake law services there. Okay, thanks, and if you have any questions, feel free to post to the Q&A forums. I'll see you there.